Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and hi if you're new here, I'm Jade, and it's time for my February wrap up. I really enjoyed doing my January wrap up video, which was my first one, just because I really enjoy just talking about different genres and different books and everything like that, and I love watching these as well, just to see what everyone has been reading. Yeah, uh, let me not ramble too much because I know I'm good at that. And let's get on with what I read. So, in total, I read 9 books this month, which is not bad at all. I had a bit of a weird month. Like, it was busy in some weeks and not so busy in others. And I've been kind of building my business and stuff. So, I've been quite focused on that. But yeah, I want to share what I read. So starting off with actually an ebook. I'm not really an ebook reader, but a really nice author asked if I would read and review a book of hers. It isn't an ARC, it is actually something that is already out, and I will display the front cover here so you can see. So the book is called Murder Worth the Wait. As you can probably tell, it's sort of like a thriller. I'd call it a bit of a psychological thriller. That's how I would describe it. I have to say, I think the cover is terrible. It looks kind of cheap. Sorry to the author. This isn't a judgment on your writing, it's literally just the cover. But I have to be honest, with my reviews and my views on it. And I just think it makes the book look way worse than it is. That's what I'm going to say. Because I actually really enjoyed the book. I was really surprised after seeing the cover and also reading the synopsis. It's got a bit of a weird plot line. I honestly wasn't sure I was going to like it, I'll be honest. I thought it might be a bit bizarre. And it was bizarre, but in a good, unique way for me. So ultimately, it is about a serial killer, and it's all linked together due to weight and weight loss, and people kind of, I guess you could say, abusing that industry. So I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but essentially, we follow this girl who is a writer, and she meets a guy randomly on a train who just happens to own this like magazine, and he kind of wants to revamp it, and she gets a job with him, and then she starts investigating this like serial killer story, even though she's told not to, and it kind of just escalates from there. And we find out about past murders that are linked. It actually starts off with a past murder to like get you into the book for the prologue, and then it goes into the main story. And I actually really enjoyed it. I found it a super easy read. It was very fast paced, and therefore was just like a really good, easy thriller to read that I think kind of keeps you engaged. So I gave it a 3.75 rating because I really, really enjoyed it. My only criticisms were the topics were a little bit weird. I think it could be a little bit of a trigger, maybe for some people if they really struggle with their weight. It is definitely a very niche topic, but I really liked the fact that it was unique. It's just, for me, there were certain parts that just felt like slightly rushed, which is the only reason I've taken off a bit of the rating, but I still really enjoyed it. And so, yeah, I gave it 3.75 stars. And if you like your kind of good, easy thriller reads, especially with a bit of a unique story, I would say maybe you should try this one. Okay, so moving on to my physical reads of the month. We are starting out with Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, which is from the Throne of Glass series. I really wanted to carry on with this month. I actually really wanted to try and get like a certain amount of series I was doing either completed or just continued, because I do feel like I'm in the middle of so many, and so many books I want to pick up are series, and I feel like a lot of my TBR are series. And so I just kind of wanted to try and clear through them a little bit. Obviously, Throne of Glass has a lot of books, so I'm not going to get straight through that. But I really enjoyed Crown of Midnight. I found it a little bit similar to Throne of Glass at the beginning, in a way, like how it ended. It just felt a little bit repetitive of the plot, but I still really enjoyed it. I love Sarah J. Maas's writing. And then as you got to like the end of, so it's split into part 1 and 2. As you got to the end of part 1, it just suddenly got so good, so dramatic. I couldn't put it down. I loved it. Obviously, I can't talk too much about the plot because it's not the first book in a series, but if you want to know more about the series itself, if you haven't read this, although I'm sure many of you have, or at least heard of it, if you watch my January wrap up, then you will see me talking about the first book, Throne of Glass, a little bit. I gave this 4.75 stars. I took off just a 0.25 because I'm trying to be a little bit more harsh in my ratings this year. And I just felt I just slightly preferred Throne of Glass to Crown of Midnight, even though the end of this book was amazing. So it's a very, very slight indifference. I loved it anyway. But yeah, definitely pick up the series if you liked Sarah J. Maas, but you haven't read this one. I'm loving it so far. So this is the next book I read, which was my book club that I attend in person's pick for this month. It's probably something I don't know if I necessarily would have picked up. I do like a thriller, as you can probably see. It is a thriller. It's kind of humorous as well, I will say. It's not like a very, very serious thriller. It's got like a little bit of humor in it. I don't know if I would have picked this up. I hadn't heard of it, but I did really like it. I gave it a 3. Mainly because I think it had a really, really strong start to the plot, and then there were just bits that felt a little bit long, and then other bits that felt a little bit rushed, and I would have just liked to get to have known the characters a little bit more. I think because we do have sort of 4 main characters in this, and there's a lot of other characters in the plot for not a very long book. I just felt we could have gone a bit further, but I still really enjoyed it. So basically what this is about is there are 4 women who have just retired, and they used to work for this sort of assassin organization. So they're retired assassins, and they're all going on this cruise to, enjoy their retirement, and they suddenly become aware of someone they know on board, and they think there must be a plot to, for someone to be assassinated, and then they soon realize they are the target. And then it kind of escalates from there, and they're trying to figure out why they are now targets to be assassinated, and it kind of goes off into this wild story, and then we find out who exactly is behind everything. So yeah, it's kind of a thriller mystery with a little bit of humor, so it's a good mix, and it's a really quick, easy read. So if you want to try something of that kind of genre, this is definitely a quick, easy read. As I said, I gave it a 3. I enjoyed it, but would I pick it up again? Probably not. There is also a sequel, and I'm not like rushed to go and get it, but I did enjoy reading it. Then of course Valentine's Day fell into this month, so I had to get a couple of romances off my TBR. You've probably heard me say I'm mainly a seasonal reader. I tend to lean towards romances a lot more in the summer, but it was kind of topical because being Valentine's, so I really just had the urge to read some. So the first one I went for was Part Your World by Abby Jiminez. It doesn't have a very summery cover. I think that's why I just reached for this straight away. Plus, I've heard so many good things about Abby Jiminez, and this has sat on my TBR for so long, and I was like, I need to finally read a book by her. And well, I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. So a quick summary of the plot without giving any spoilers is a girl breaks down in her car, and then a guy comes to her rescue, and it sort of all just goes from there. It's kind of like a small town romance because she breaks down and he lives in a small town. She comes from the city. She lives a very different life. She's actually going through a bit of I guess you could say, a messy breakup. And, she was actually in a mentally abusive relationship, we find out. And she's trying to leave that in the past. And then she meets this guy, and it's a very different lifestyle. And she starts getting torn between that, her pressure from her family to be good in her career. And yeah, it's just it is a bit of a stereotypical tropey love story, but it's just written so well. You literally fall in love with the characters. They are, yeah. I just think it is written so well. It's a dual POV, which I find a lot of books are these days, and I do really enjoy them, but I am that just seems to be almost the norm of everything I pick up now. But yeah, if you like your romances and you haven't tried this one, definitely try it, because yes, it is a little bit cliche like a lot of romance novels are, but I feel like it definitely dives into some deeper meanings and feelings, especially with family pressure and fitting in and emotional abuse. And so there's a lot of other things in here other than just simply the love story. So I have to recommend this. If you at all like your romance novels, please read this if you haven't. Yeah, I loved it. So we have another romance next, another author that I was like, I need to finally read because everyone talks about, and that is Hazelwood. And so obviously I had The Love Hypothesis on my TBR, so I reached for this as my second romance novel for Valentine's week. I actually asked people to vote on this. If you watched my cozy reading vlog, this book is mainly what it's about. I actually put a poll, and everyone voted that I read this one out of a choice of a few romances. This was another one I gave a 5-star to. I must say, reflecting back, I think I slightly preferred the Abby Jimenez book, but I did still really enjoy this. I had a bit of a snow day, which is why I asked everyone to vote. We had a bit of a snowstorm. And so I read this just in one sitting. It took me about 4 hours, I think. It's not the longest book, it's a very easy read. But I just really enjoyed it. I loved the characters in it. That was the main thing. So what it is about is there is a PhD student, science student, if you can't tell them from the cover, and she wants her friend to date her ex. That sounds kind of bizarre, doesn't it? Best friend is interested in her ex, and her ex didn't really mean a lot to her, and she thinks they'd make a really good couple, and she wants them to date. So she pretends to be out on a date, and then her friend turns up because she's actually at university working, and she grabs the first guy she sees and kisses him. And it turns out it's one of the professors, not hers, thankfully. And he's not that much older than her. A bit, I will say. It has a bit of an age difference. If you don't like that, you're not going to like this book. But yeah, essentially, it then leads to them faking this relationship to help each other out. But then we find out more about why he's doing it. I don't want to say much more because I don't want to give away the story, but basically they start fake dating. So it's a fake dating trope, which I haven't really read before. So I do think that might be why I have given this such a high rating, because I don't really have anything of this complete trope to compare it to. So let me know if there's other good fake dating romances that I should read as well. Because yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. And the funny thing is, which I did mention in my cozy vlog, is I was just really shocked because there is a little bit of spice in this. If you don't like your spice, again, not going to be a book for you. It's only like one scene, but I wasn't expecting it, because don't you just think this cover just looks young adult? It like screams YA, and so I just didn't expect it. I honestly thought this was YA, and even the way it reads for the most part, I'd say is very YA, but it then suddenly has a spicy scene. So just a warning. But I mean, I enjoyed it, but you know, I like it. If I like the characters and I feel they have a genuine connection, I tend to enjoy spice. If it's thrown in there for no reason, I'm not so interested. But yeah, this is another romance I would recommend. So for the next book, we're heading back into the fantasy genre, and I read Legendborn by Tracy, Deonn. A online book club that I follow was going to read this, and I had sort of heard of this book before, and I was really intrigued by it because it is based upon, or like uses the idea of, the legend of King Arthur. One of my favorite books growing up was Meg Cabot's Avalon High, and that also was sort of based on King Arthur. So that really had me intrigued in this book. I will say they are very, very different. So if you've read Meg Cabot, Avalon High, such a different novel. However, that is why I decided to get it and read along with the online book club. It is quite a long book. I was really surprised. So it is YA, but it's very long. It has very small print. Like, let me show you. Yeah. So it's actually, for a YA, it felt quite heavy, but I still really enjoyed it. So I gave it a 4-star. The only reason I didn't give it a 5 is I felt like it took me a little bit to get into the book. And also, there is a lot of lore and different stuff in this. Like, all to do with the King Arthur stuff. It uses Welsh terms, it has other terms, obviously made up for the book. And my brain was a little bit like, oh my God, like we could really do with like a glossary, like if you've ever read When the Moon Hatched, it has a glossary at the beginning. I was like, this book could benefit from a glossary. However, this was the pick because it was Black History Month, and I loved the protagonist, and it also did really well, I think, at like incorporating some Black history into this story. And it also does deal a little bit with race issues. She essentially is one of the only Black students at a school she goes to. So before I talk too much about the themes, I probably should tell you a little bit about the plot of the book. So our female main character, I love her. She is such a strong character, and essentially her mother has just passed away. She's grieving. She's not necessarily in the best mental state, and she goes to this boarding school with her best friend, and she wants to just escape home, and it's actually the school her mother used to go to. Then on her first night there, she actually witnesses a demon attack, and it turns out that most people can't actually see these demons and creatures, but she does, and she ends up getting involved with this whole sort of secret society called Legendborn, and she then has to like navigate and realize, what she is, why can she see demons, who can see demons, like, and there's a whole story into it, and it all then links to King Arthur. There'd be a lot for me to say, and I don't want to like give away the plot, but I do think it's really good. It's a really complex book, but the more you read on, the more you start to understand it, and I think the character makes it all the worthwhile reading, honestly, because she's so good. Essentially, there is a bit of a love story too, so it's romantasy. And yeah, if you like your romances, I would recommend this one, but it's definitely not the easiest to get into. So if you've not tried the genre, maybe not the one to start with, but I did think it was really good. So the next book I then reached for was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which is the third book in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I picked this up because then I was like, I will have finished that trilogy, and it is one series that I can say I've completely done and removed from my TBR. The third part of the Holly Jackson Good Girl Guide to Murder series, I enjoyed reading it, but I only rated it a 3-star. This is my lowest rating of the whole entire series, and a part of me was really torn on where to rate it, because I did enjoy reading it. Like, I do like Holly Jackson's writing style. I think it's easy and accessible, but I don't like where the plot went with this book at all. For me, it kind of ruined the main character. Obviously, I can't talk too much about the plot. This is a part 3, and I don't want to spoil the series for anyone. But all I would say is our female main character, Pip, I loved her in the first book. The second book I found slightly repetitive. I still enjoyed it. So I think I gave from memory, I think I gave the first book 5 stars because I loved it. The second one 4, and now this one 3. But yeah, essentially they just ruined the character for me. I don't like how it ended. I don't think the story should have gone in this direction. And that's why I can't rate it higher, because even though I did enjoy reading it, I was just left feeling like, oh no, like, I don't like it. It's ruined for me. That's all I can really say. So if you're in the middle of the series, I mean, maybe you'll prefer it to me. I know some people did, because it was different. Because as I said, the second book was a bit repetitive from the first, and this one is different. It's just, it just wasn't for me where the plot went. And then my next read was Rebel Witch, because that finally came out, which is the second book to Heartless Hunter, or if you're in the UK or Europe, it is known as The Crimson Moth. This is the Crimson Moth series. So yeah, this is the second book, Rebel Witch. So again, I can't really talk too much about the plot, but it is a duology, so this is the final part. It's just the 2 books, so it's like another one I could finish by just reading it as soon as it came out. And I loved the first book, Heartless Hunter. I would definitely recommend that, because it's an easy read, but there's something about it. It's really, really good. It just absorbs you in. Like, is it my favorite fantasy of all time? Probably not, but it's just such a good quick read that I would recommend it to anyone. And essentially the original plot is about a girl who is a witch and a guy who's a witch hunter, essentially, and they sort of fall for each other, and it's a bit complicated. There's almost a bit of a love triangle thing going on, and obviously they're on opposite sides, because in this world they're trying to stop magic and witches. And yeah, it's kind of like a slightly more modern day. Actually, I don't know if it's set in the modern day. Not really, but no, it's not. It's definitely not. But the way it's written feels really modern. So it's like a more modern telling of a witch hunting story. So yeah, Rebel Witch, I gave 4.25 stars to. Again, loved it. So easy to read, so good. The only reason I dropped that down a bit is there is so much in this book that honestly, I kind of feel it should have been a trilogy, and bits could have been expanded upon. The odd bit felt a little bit rushed. And so that is the only reason. I was hoping I was going to love this to the point of 5 stars. If I'm honest, I had really high hopes, but to me, there was just too many bits that I feel like could have done with more. And if you have read it, all I'm going to say is wisdom. And if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. Because yeah, there should have been more about that. And then my final book of the month is returning to the Throne of Glass series. I decided to read The Assassin's Blade. Now, I know a lot of people read this as book 1 because it is essentially the beginning of the story, but it was released later. So I am reading in what I believe to be the published order of the book. And honestly, I think I'm reading it the right way. I'm sure some of you will disagree, but to me, reading this, the beginning was kind of slow. And I think if I didn't already know the characters, honestly, I think it would take me a while to get into. So I wouldn't recommend starting with this because I just don't feel like I would have been that invested in the first couple of stories. There's 5 short stories in here, by the way, but they kind of link. It's kind of like a novel, but with like the travel time cut out of it. But as you continue through the book, I think the stories get better and better and more engaging. So I did really enjoy it. I just don't know if I'd have started this as the first book, whether I would be as quickly into the Throne of Glass series, if I'm honest. As I said, I'm sure many of you will disagree and think, no, I read this first. I think it's better first. But for me, third seemed perfect in the series. I've given it 4 stars because obviously it is sort of more of a backstory. So therefore, I just didn't quite enjoy it as much as the other 2 books, but I still really enjoyed it. So obviously, I mean, it's a 4-star. That's a great rating. Okay, and that is everything I read in February. Obviously, it's a slightly shorter month. I managed 9 books, which I'm really happy with. And yeah, I hope to continue with some more good reads next month. And obviously, I will share them with you again. I have a feeling I'm going to get quite a lot of books in March. My birthday falls in March. So I feel like a book haul may be coming your way, maybe beginning of April. So I can just like share with you everything I get because my birthday's right at the end of March. Yeah, and I've got a few other videos planned. I'm sorry I didn't post much this month. I've just been quite busy as my husband's birthday, Valentine's, my business was getting busier, just things like that. But I do want to try and do a bit more regular uploads. But I also don't want to just like force a video, which just feels like I'm doing it for the sake of it and it isn't something I want to be doing. Because then I feel like that comes across on camera. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing what I've read. And let me know if you've read any of these, if any of them are on your TBR, or if you have any high recommendations of something you've read this month. Please let me know, and I will see you again real soon. Bye!